Let's talk about the concept of recruitment and selection. Two different concepts. Part of the process in human resources, you have to do an inventory and actually go through and say, how many people are we going to have right now? How many people are we going to have in the future? How many do we want to lay anybody off? Are we missing holes in our staffing? Do we need people with different skills than we currently have? You prepare also a job analysis. Sometimes, if somebody's looking to create another job and has another need, sometimes you actually go through and analyze what they need. You assess what we're going to have in the future. You look 3, 4, 5 years out. You look on the future labor supply, and you might have to go and do some recruiting, some unusual recruiting, depending upon what's out there, and then establish a strategic plan. And let's go back and think about it. Strategic is typically more than 1 year out, it's 3+ years out. So that's strategic, and HR should be in that world. On a job analysis, you study what is done by employees who hold various job titles. And then once you do that analysis, then you create a job description, which is the objectives of the job, the type of work to be done, and then you create job specifications. But let's look into this a little bit. On a job analysis, let's say you observe a current sales rep doing the job. You discuss the job with the sales manager, and you have current sales reps keep a diary of their activities. You analyze what that person is doing, and then from that, you actually go through and you create job specifications. Sometimes, if you don't have this job in your own ranks, you go find out what they do either by doing some research, either by going observing what you currently may have and what you want to change in it, or maybe even go see a different company how they handle this. But from the job analysis, you make some specifications of, okay, what would this person need to be successful? 2 years work experience in the area, positive attitude, that's always a big plus for sales, good communications skills, at least a high school diploma, preferably 2 years of college credit. And then once you have all this down pat, you do a thing called a job description. You're going to sit down and sell the company's products and territories. These duties include servicing accounts and maintaining positive relationships with clients. Responsibilities, introducing the new products to store managers in the area, helping store managers estimate the volume to order, negotiate. All these are duties in the job description. Typically, you'll have anywhere from 5 to 10 duties. Having 10 duties is actually pretty common in a job description. Sometimes I've seen them go up to 40 duties. Now, almost nobody can handle 40 duties, but sometimes you build them so they can handle multiple different types of duties. But normally, you always put the most vital ones at the very beginning in numerical order. So we call that a job description. Almost every company will have a job description for every job. Titles going well. Sometimes you'll see titles and job descriptions that are absolutely crazy. A human resource director becomes the chief people officer. They're actually, I saw one out there called the chief heart officer. It's got nothing to do with surgery. It's got about the person in charge of how people feel. Yes, really? Seriously? The head of dynamic work. What does that mean? Okay, oh, it's the office furniture for home. Okay, so you got people out there, it's called Titles Gone Wild, and you have these different weird titles, and we're supposed to all see them and automatically know what they mean. They're cute. I'm not certain how productive they are. It's a new world. So that being said, recruitment, though, you're going to take that job description and you're going to recruit for that position. Set of activities you use to obtain a sufficient number of right people at the right time. Human resource managers, they use both internal sources and they use external sources to gather people in. Your job is to create a pool of applicants. And so you go out and you advertise, you create a pool of internal, external applicants, and you want to sit down and look at them. And they can actually be quite big. My record number was 966 applicants for one job. The one job was a part-time job that worked 19 and a half hours a week and was in the child care center as an assistant. What do you do with 966 applications? Let me tell you what you do. You want to whittle them down to something more manageable. So you're going to go through the applications, not looking for the best qualified, looking for the least qualified and clear the decks. We did that and we got it down to 300. Then we had to sit down and reduce that. Gee, if somebody has a PhD, do you think they're going to stay long in a child care assistant job? Okay, what if they have this over here? So your goal is to weed them out and hopefully get down to about 10 people you can interview. So the recruitment is gathering a pool of applications and seeing people that are interested in a job and then weaning that down to the ones that you think are the best qualified for it. They come from all kinds of different things. You'll see on the right-hand side all the internal sources. On the left-hand side, look at all the potential external sources. And then on top of that, then you go and you advertise as well. And finally, once you recruit from that pool, your job is to select a position. And there's different skill sets involved in doing that. And it depends what kind of organization with you're at. I'm in education, higher education. We almost can't do anything without having a committee. I got hired in a job one time. There were 23 people on the committee. And believe it or not, I was the number one vote getter of all 23 of them. Bless their hearts, smartest group of people on planet Earth that I could possibly imagine. So they hired me in that job. I had to sit down and be the best candidate in the mind of 23 different people. But a lot of times in the private sector, you'll have one, two, or three people hiring you. You'll even have some strange situations where you may go through not just one or two, but up to 20 different interviews. And over at Google, they used to have a process that if any two people give you the black spot, you don't get a job. Okay, so in essence, if you went through and somebody didn't like you, they would give you a black dot, and then you may get to somebody else, and they don't. Two people don't like you, you don't get the job. That being said, that's unusual. Normally, you're going to go through a couple processes, fill out the application for the recruitment, then be called in for the application to have an interview. They're two separate things. When you apply, that's one job. Your job is not to get the job when you apply. Your job is get called in for the interview. And then when you get the interview, you're going into the selection area, and then you want to do your very best job interview for that. Couple things to know. Always complete your application form. It's incredible how often people don't sign them. Um, Usually there's two interviews. You have initial one, and actually the initial one's probably tougher than the second one. The initial one usually have people on that committee that know all the details of the job, and they want to see if you can do that. And then you have a follow-up interview, and the follow-up was actually more general typically. Sometimes you'll have an employment test. If you have to work in spreadsheets, it's pretty common to have a spreadsheet with 5 blank spaces, figure out what the numbers are in those blank spaces. You have to go through a background check sometimes. You may have to go through a physical exam. And if you do get the job, you may have a probationary period anywhere from 3 months to a year. So that being said, how do you find them? You look everywhere possible. You want to sit down and look on social media. You want to have that online presence out there. And social media is huge. But keep in mind that social media just passed printed media in the year 2019. In 2019, printed media, actually prior to that, dominated everything, and social media passed it. But everybody needs to have a footprint somewhere in social media, which is a big deal. Now, some of the common mistakes: directions aren't followed when you apply for the job. Some pieces of the application are left blank. Sometimes the cover letter and the resume, they're not submitted or tailored to the job. I kid you not. One time somebody applied for a job as a dean at our district, and they were using an old letter from some other district they applied to. They left the other district's name in the letter. But what kind of a person would do that? Yeah, one that's sloppy and doesn't pay attention to details. Be careful, don't be that person. Sometimes people apply for a job not qualified for. That always isn't necessarily a detriment, long as you can justify why you're applying for it. And they don't explain about employment gaps. Sometimes there's a gap for several years, and if you leave it blank and don't explain what happened, you may be rejected just because you don't tell them what happened. One time I had somebody apply for a job, and they sat there and says, took 7 years off to develop the future of planet Earth. What in the world is that? It was a gal. She stayed home to raise her kid for 7 years. I thought it was so creative. We ended up hiring her, and she was actually a really good employee. So that being said, sometimes it doesn't matter why they're off, long as they explain it. People always justify and understand to some extent. Sometimes the applicant undersells themselves. And by the way, one of the real killers is poor grammar. If you really have poor grammar and multiple spelling errors, nobody's going to want to hire you off that resume or that application. Be careful about that. Do a thorough job whenever you go and apply. There's a strange job out there. It's called temporary workers, and they're called contingent workers. That's the official name in human resources. There's a couple of things. You'll have gig workers, contingent workers, you'll have all of them. I've been tracking this over the years. In 2016, we only had about 5.7 million. And now we have 72 million Americans that are in this temporary workers. So what happens is you get hired in a job, let's say you get hired in January by a CPA firm to help process taxes. So they're going to lay you off April 30th. Okay, so that happens. You get the job and you're there, and boom, okay, you're gone. So then you go on to something else. Now you're not dealing with a few people, you're dealing with millions upon millions of people that do this. In that case, I'm talking about is a very specific example. That person ended up getting a job as a bookkeeper in May at AAA, and then eventually got hired permanently in a CPA firm and worked their way up and got their CPA in the process. So that worked out really well. So if you plan your contingent worker jobs, okay, you can actually do extraordinarily well. If you have a side hustle, about 40% Americans and 50% 2023 have a side hustle. Sometimes that side hustle will give you that little bit extra people are looking for. You have to decide whether or not you're going to include that on your resume. But always consider that a lot of times they'll hire these contingent workers when full-time workers are on leave. I had a couple of jobs 2 summers in a row working, filling in for people on vacation. And I was finally offered a permanent job at a corporation that paid extraordinarily well when I'm going through college. Sometimes during a peak time, sometimes during uncertain economic times, they don't want to make a permanent hire, but a temporary. You'll see this whole group being out there, especially in seasonal business. In summertime, there's an awful lot of seasonal business workers, but you also have them in the wintertime, maybe working at a ski resort or something related to snow. Contingent workers, they receive few benefits, lower pay, they're temporary, and there's lots of them, lots of opportunities out there. So you have recruitment, you're trying to gather a pool of applicants to consider, and then selection where you're going to choose them. Know what a job description is, know about contingent or temporary workers, or even a side hustle or a gig worker. Those are all terms you should know, not just for the class, but also after the class. Know that recruitment and selection are different, and typically there's 2 interviews, so know that, and sometimes there's much more. So make certain in the process recruitment, selection, it's a major part of human resources. And this is really a lot of it where about 80% of it is the bread and butter work, so to speak, of human resources. Take care.